Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gateway TV, Gateway Gazette program. We broadcast live every Thursday from our London studio. This is news and views, and we highlight the news from across the world. But today we have a very special program tonight about the Maundy Thursday. But we are going to talk about the Easter, why Easter is important for us as a Christians, and what is the importance of Good Friday in our life. And with me, I'm so lucky that joining by Reverend Canon Dr. Andy Thompson, MBE. Reverend, we welcome to the show.
Thank you, John.
And just tell me that from which parish you belongs to.
Well, John, I'm from the parish of Uxbridge, and I'm the vicar of St. Margaret Church. St. Margaret Church is one of the oldest churches in Uxbridge, and it dates back to about 1245. So it's been a house of prayer for more than 800 years. And that's one of the things I really love about working at St. Margaret, is just realising that for 800 years, people in that place have been praying to God, faithfully serving him and loving him in that place. So today St. Margaret Church is part of a team ministry with another church in Uxbridge called St. Andrew's. The two churches together serve the people of Uxbridge. Uxbridge is on the west side of London, near Heathrow Airport, and it's a population of about 28,000 people, right at the end of the Piccadilly line, the Metropolitan line. Some people see it at the end of a line, some people see it at the beginning of a line, but it's home, and that's where we minister as a community today.
Thank you very much, Andy, for the brief introduction. And well, viewers, it's a good opportunity for you. If you are in Uxbridge Town Centre, you want to join us for a service, you can come on Thursday, Friday. We have a Friday service for a Good Friday, Thursday in the evening. And then we also have two services on Sunday. So you can come and join us anytime during this time. So today's program is a very special program for us. We are going to talk about, today is Thursday, Maundy Thursday. The Bible teaches us Judas agrees to betray Jesus, and Luke chapter 22. Now the festival of unleavened bread called the Passover was approaching, and the chief priest and the teacher of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. The Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and Judah went to the chief priest and the officer of the temple guard and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. He consented and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present. Maundy Thursday is a part of the Christian celebration of Easter and marks the night of the Last Supper as told in the Bible. At the Last Supper, Jesus commanded that people should love one another. He then washed the feet of his disciples as an act of kindness. The word Maundy comes from the Latin mandatum, or command, which refers to the instruction Jesus gives his disciple at the Last Supper. In many countries, the day is known the Holy Thursday and is a public holiday. Andy, what is the importance of Last Supper in our Christian life?
Well, it's important to remember that the Last Supper essentially was part of a Jewish festival called the Passover. And Passover is probably the most significant festival for the Jewish community. It's a reminder of the time when they were prisoners and slaves in the land of Egypt. And God made a promise to set his people free and lead them to the promised land. And so it goes through the story of how Pharaoh refused to let the Jewish people go. And God sent plague after plague after plague until the final one, when God said, if you don't let my people go, I will kill the firstborn of every living thing in your country. And so that night, Moses told the people to prepare for that curse by putting blood on the door lintels above their homes, and to make sure that when the angel of death came through the land, it would pass over, which is where we get the word Passover from, pass over the houses of the Jewish community, and they would then be set free to go to the promised land. So in order to remember that event, the Jewish people have a festival called Passover where they tell that story every single year. And in Jerusalem, particularly, Jews like to gather there to remember that event. So part of the festival is a meal in which children are asked questions over the different parts of a meal as to what it means. So you have the lamb that is in the middle of a meal, reminding them of the lamb that was sacrificed, whose blood was then daubed on the door. You've got the wine and the bread. Jewish children to this very day are reminded of that story. So the Last Supper is taking place within the context of the Passover. But what's different about this event is that Jesus takes this very familiar and annual ritual and he changes it to make it about himself. One of the striking things in the Gospels is there's no mention, for example, on the table of a lamb. Where's the lamb? And by implication, the absence of a lamb points to Jesus himself being the sacrificial lamb who is replacing what is on the table. So there's all sorts of clues Jesus is given the Christians on what this means to him. So he breaks the bread, and in the Jewish faith, bread was used as a symbol of the presence of God in the Holy of Holies in the temple. So the bread is about God being broken, which is quite a shocking thing for a man to say about himself. And when he takes the wine and he holds the wine up, he blesses it, and he tells the disciples that the wine represents his blood, which is sacrificed on the cross. And so Jesus changes the meaning of the Passover from a story which was people looking to the past and saying, this is how God set me free, to a story that is relevant for today. And Jesus is saying, I am the Lamb, it's my body that was broken, it's my blood which sets you free today. And so it becomes very significant. Another important thing which you mentioned, John, was the meaning of the word Maundy. Maundy is a Latin word meaning commandment. And in that supper, in that Last Supper, Jesus introduces a very important ethic which becomes the prevailing rule for the Christian community today. And that is to love one another. And indeed, Jesus summed up the whole law of God into two. He said, love God and love one another. So today, the Last Supper, a reminder of Maundy Thursday, is a call for the Christian community all over the world to get back to the basics. Don't get too bound up with traditions. Don't get too bound up with looking to the past. Instead, focus on loving God today and loving one another.
And Andy, could you please also tell us this, what is the significance of foot washing and what is important for us? And Jesus has given us the message of love one another, and also to serve one another. What is the significance in our life?
Well, I think Jesus was recognizing that in the world then, as it is today, most people see success as being powerful. Success is being given the ability to control people and the environment around us. But what Jesus was teaching, that if you want to be successful in the eyes of God, we need to learn to be humble and we need to serve one another. And one of the dirtiest jobs in the empire at that time was given to servants as people came into the house, was to wash people's feet. People wore sandals in those days. It was dirty, it was dusty and muddy, and it was not a very nice job. and it was a job that went to the lowliest servant in the house. So Jesus was saying quite a shocking thing. He said, if you want to be successful in the kingdom of God, you need to have the heart, the mindset of the humblest servant in the house. And he demonstrated that by wrapping a towel around himself and washing his disciples' feet. The disciples were very upset. They were quite offended, actually, because this is their rabbi, their teacher, someone who had great status in their group, taken on the lowliest role as a servant. And so the challenge for today is, well, what does that look like for us as a Christian community, especially for those of us in the Church of England, which is traditionally linked with power. The Church of England is the state church. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II is the head of our church. How then should the Church of England, which is traditionally linked with power, become a servant to all the people who we are called to minister to? And that's a constant challenge for us today. How do we wash people's feet today? And at St. Margaret's Church, that would look like having a food bank, making sure people are fed, making sure we provide activities for young people and young families every week, making sure people have a place to meet so they're not lonely, picking up phone calls and calling people who are housebound because of disability or because they're elderly. And these are the things which we try and put into practice as a way of following Jesus' example of washing somebody's feet.
And one thing, because what holiday was Jesus was observing that night? The Last Supper is derived from Jesus' Jewish heritage and his observance of a Jewish holiday. But the sad part was that somebody has betrayed. How do you take that part? Is it a painful, and is it not a joyful thing? And it's a very painful. How do you describe that?
Yes, we're talking about Judas, who betrayed Jesus for money. I think it's a reminder to us that the story of Jesus is set in a very real human world. There are characters we can recognize. We know that life can really deal us some very nasty surprises. And we know that people themselves can be corrupted by all sorts of things: power, money, sex. And that was true for Jesus as well. Within his own circle of friends, who was betrayed by someone who walked the road with him, who spent many hours with him. And I think for many people, when we look at the story of Jesus, we see a real story. It's not a happy ever after kind of story. It's a story where Jesus had real struggles, where he experienced all the negative stuff that life can throw at us. That included betrayal, being falsely accused, being lied about, being tortured unjustly, going through a kangaroo court and found guilty for something he was never guilty of. All of these things are part of the human predicament. And because of that, it speaks to people today.
Thank you very much, Andy. And one more thing which I would like that our viewers should know, that what is more important for us? Do we celebrate the Maundy Thursday, or do we should we feel sad, or how would you like that? It is a very important day in our Christian life. This week is the Holy Week. And what we have to do, especially on Maundy Thursday?
Well, I think it's really helpful to look at Holy Week as a pilgrimage, a journey. And every year, Christians remind ourselves of our story by walking our story from the very beginning, really, to the end. And we need to do it every year for the simple reason is we forget. We forget what Jesus teaches us. We forget the example of what Jesus has shown us in the way we live our lives. So every year we have Holy Week to walk the story of Jesus through all the different services and liturgies and rituals we have, and to remind ourselves what it's all about. So to complete the journey, we have to go through the sad part, the difficult part, the painful bit, before we get to the good bits. We need a Good Friday in order to make sense of Easter. We need Maundy Thursday to understand what Jesus was trying to teach his disciples. So every year we walk this journey and we are reminded afresh and anew that this is what our faith is about.
Well, it might be possible that some of our viewers will watch this program. And would you also describe a little bit more about the foot washing? Which message Jesus wanted to give to his disciple?
I think Jesus was trying to make sure that his disciples were not going to build an empire. We weren't going to replace his teachings with a structure where people would be oppressed or exploited. And when you look at church history, you think, well, we've not really done a very good job of that. We see all sorts of examples of where the church has wandered away from the teachings of Jesus. The church has been involved in politics, it has been involved in persecution, it's been involved in power struggles. But if we go back to the teachings of Jesus, we're reminded time and time again that our greatness comes through serving others. Our greatness comes in confronting power, not in an attitude of rebellion or by complying and colluding with power, but instead facing it head on with love and refusing to compromise the dignity of the people we live among and serve.
And one more thing, once the Maundy Thursday is finished, and then we have Good Friday. So the Good Friday is a very sad day for us. As a Christian, our Jesus Christ was crucified on that day. Could you please also tell us that what is the significance of Good Friday in our Christian life?
Good Friday, people will say, well, why is it called Good Friday? It's telling a very sad story of an innocent man who faces a gross miscarriage of justice and is executed by empire in satisfying the political desires of another group. But in truth, Good Friday is the story of how God tried to speak to the world through the example of Jesus. Jesus gives us the example of love played out on a world stage. Jesus lays down his life in order to disarm the empire of his power. So Good Friday is when Jesus, first of all, offers his life as an atonement. Now, there's lots of different ideas about what happened on the cross, but one of the ideas we find in the Bible is the idea of Jesus offering himself as a sacrifice to atone for the sins of the many. Other people are saying, no, that's not quite the full story. Another idea is Jesus offering himself as a ransom to buy the freedom of his people, just like Moses did with the people of Israel and setting them free from Pharaoh. So Jesus offers himself as a ransom to set the people free to know God as Father. Another way of understanding the cross is to see how Jesus laid down his life as a supreme example of loving those he cared for and whom God has given him. And he showed that instead of fighting a military action against empire, or instead of colluding with the exploitation and oppression of people, which is a feature of empire, he showed another way. He submitted to the empire, but through his death on the cross, he disarmed its powers by inspiring others to follow his example, to overcome the greed, the hypocrisy, the power of empire, and instead to overcome it with love and self-sacrifice and service to others.
We will continue our discussion. Now we have a beautiful song which sung by St. Margaret's Choir, Uxbridge. So we are going to hear that song.
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, free in one. God of glory, majesty,
Well, how do you think that's going?
praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, free in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till the stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father and restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free, for the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, free in one. God of glory, majesty, praise for